Space Jam. It's one of those films in which there's no general consensus as to its quality, or lack thereof. People have called this film an insult to the Looney Tunes and a truly awful film. Others have called it a really fun time and a very enjoyable film that has the same, or at the very least similar spirit to the original cartoons. Many fans have cited this as one of the lowest points in Looney Tunes history. Okay, maybe not the lowest, but certainly up there. Okay, fine, there's been a lot of low moments throughout Looney Tunes history. But still, it can't really be that bad, can it? I mean, for one film, it's managed to rake in $6 billion in merchandising revenue. And yes, that's billion with a B. Honestly, for one single solitary film, that is an impressive feat. It's even managed to maintain a cult following over the years, to the point where there's a sequel currently in development with LeBron James, produced and co-written by Ryan Coogler. Yes, that Ryan Coogler. That, and all of its financial success, is nothing to sneer at or overlook. Regardless of what you may think of it, there must be something in here that drew people into it, right? In a film that's as divisive as this, especially one that many people who hate the film claim is the result of people being blinded by nostalgia goggles, I have to ask if these arguments have any merit, or if there are legitimate things to like about this film. Now, I may not be the most objective reviewer when it comes to this because, full disclosure, I did watch this film all the time as a kid, but I'm going to do my best to properly analyze the parts of this film that I feel are worth a second look. So now, for this movie Space Jam, I only have one question to ask. Is it any good? Okay, so here's the plot. And if you're thinking this sounds like a Mad Libs game brought to the big screen, I wouldn't blame you. It's almost like a bunch of studio execs sat around and tried to cram as many elements they could of what they thought 90s kids would like into this film. Aliens come down to Earth and track down the Looney Tunes characters, hoping to kidnap them and take them back to their planet where they can keep them as slaves for their amusement park. But thankfully, these aliens aren't too bright, and the Looney Tunes are able to trick them into promising to grant them their freedom if the Looney Tunes can defeat them in a game of basketball. Which seems like it'd be easy because these aliens are super short. But after the aliens steal the talents of 5 NBA players and transform their bodies into whatever the heck these things are, the Looney Tunes decide to kidnap Michael Jordan, who at this time in history was a baseball player, not a basketball player, to help them defeat the aliens in their basketball game and save the Looney Tunes from eternal servitude. The film's plot is so out there that you have to wonder how it even managed to come about in the first place. Well, you have to go back to 1992. Back when Michael Jordan was a spokesman for Nike shoes, they began releasing a series of commercials starring both Michael Jordan, Air Jordan, and Bugs Bunny, Hair Jordan. These commercials were a huge success, and of course, when something is a huge success, companies work hard to exploit as much out of it as they possibly can. And thus, Space Jam was born, released in 1996, and was, believe it or not, the very first non-packaged Looney Tunes film ever made. But let's ignore the fact that this film was essentially written to be one big ad for Nike, as well as one big promotional piece for Michael Jordan. Let's just judge this as a film. But before I actually get into the review proper, I want to take some time to point out something that's bothered me, even as a kid. So this film was rated PG, which is fine, but look at what the MPAA rated it PG for. Some mild cartoon language. What does that even mean? Swear words that are swear words for cartoon characters?
Okay. Now, which of you maroons has ever played basketball before?
Come back here, you screwy rodent.
We've got balls! Whoa!
I don't know, it's almost like they knew this film should be PG, but they couldn't really articulate why. And if this was why it was rated PG,
What the hell's going on?
why didn't they just say for a brief mild language? It makes no sense to me. Anyway, sorry, on to the review itself. One criticism that gets tossed this film's way is that Bugs Bunny would have been able to take down these smaller aliens without needing the whole basketball game gimmick. Even Chuck Jones brought this up. And yeah, of course that's true. If you, of course, assume that the Looney Tunes characters in this film's universe aren't simply actors acting out a part. If you suddenly view this film through that lens of the Looney Tunes being actors and performers, suddenly a lot of this makes more sense. I mean, Bugs attempts to trick the aliens very early on with his usual shtick, but it doesn't work. But even so, even though the Looney Tunes are performers in this universe, they still maintain most of their original personalities. Bugs Bunny is still smart and quick thinking. Daffy Duck is kind of a combination of both the Bob Clampett-style wacky Daffy and the Chuck Jones narcissistic Daffy. Porky Pig is a doormat. I couldn't think of any moments off the top of my head that are too out of character for these characters, other than things that could be explained away by these Looney Tunes being performers. And so, now we get to one of the more divisive parts of this film. Lola Bunny. Opinions about this character are all over the place. Honestly, much like the film itself. It's not really a stretch to say that the sole reason this character was created was to add a bit more gender diversity to a mostly male Looney Tunes cast, as well to give Bugs Bunny a love interest. Nothing inherently wrong with either of these things, just pointing that out. But how's her character and personality? Well, it is definitely true that she's not as wacky or loony as the other characters. She does at the very least have traces of a personality. She's a tomboy, and she seems fully aware of her sex appeal, shall we say. Not exactly the most well-defined character, but it's not like she's a completely blank slate either. Although I will definitely admit her retooled personality as a hyper-obsessed, absent-minded nutjob in the Looney Tunes show is far funnier and more interesting than her Space Jam personality. But as to whether I hate her as a character, I would say no. She's a passable character. She's got a good character design, and she's certainly not annoying, which is always a plus. So while I see where all the complaints are coming from, I also don't think that she's worthy of all the hate that gets tossed her way. But as to the other Looney Tunes characters, they're fine. They're in character, well animated, and voice acted well. On the plus side, it was quite nice to see some of the lesser known Looney Tunes characters make cameo appearances. But what about the human characters? Well, let's start with the man of the hour, Michael Jordan. As a character, I suppose he gets the job done. He's supposed to be the straight man to the Looney Tunes antics, as well as to be their leader during the basketball game. And he does alright in that regard. He does actually get some genuinely good and hilarious reactions from time to time. Although there are certainly moments where he does act a little too disinterested in what's going on. Honestly, there really isn't a whole lot to him. He does get an inkling of a story arc, but the story arc isn't really developed all that well. He seems to be having second thoughts about his retirement and then changing career as a minor league baseball player. He then plays the basketball game against the Monstars and wins. Then all of a sudden, he decides he wants to play basketball again. It's pretty much the bare minimum of what could be considered a character arc. Although at least Michael Jordan has a natural charisma about him that makes him an enjoyable presence on the screen, even if he's not really given a whole lot of material to work with. Next is Stan, played by Wayne Knight. Okay, I'm just gonna be honest. I don't like this character. He's annoying as crap and is often infuriating to watch. And I get that was supposed to be the point of the character, that he was supposed to be annoying, that Michael Jordan was supposed to be annoyed by him. But I just don't find his antics and his fawning over Jordan all that funny. And when you are writing a character that is supposed to annoy another character, it is imperative that he doesn't also annoy the audience. And he does. Thankfully, the character does improve in the second half, but it can be frustrating getting through his worst moments early on. Also, the 5 basketball players that get their talent stolen from them, while they don't get much screen time, get some genuinely funny moments. And if this film is any indication, they actually have some good comedic timing. Also, I'm quite amused by the fact that these basketball players agreed to play film versions of themselves that for the majority of the runtime absolutely suck at playing basketball, while their rival, Michael Jordan, gets to be their savior and returns their talent to them. The last one I'm going to talk about is Bill Murray. He is easily the funniest human character in the entire film. He's playing a caricaturized version of himself, who constantly bemoans the fact that he never got a chance to play in the NBA. He may not get a ton of screen time, but nearly every line of dialogue he says is pure gold, and he's in the movie just long enough as to not overstate his welcome. This film's story is an excuse plot, a plot that's designed solely to showcase something. In this case, an excuse to get Michael Jordan to play a basketball game with the Looney Tunes. That was what this film was marketed as, and that was the sole reason this film was made. Why have aliens come down and try to kidnap the Looney Tunes? Well, because they need somebody to play a game of basketball with real stakes. How do you get them to challenge them to a basketball game in the first place? By making the aliens start out tiny. But then how do you make them a genuine threat later on? Well, by having them steal the talent of 5 NBA players. Which, now that I think about it, is an oddly specific ability to have. Then how do you get Michael Jordan involved to help them? Well, have the Looney Tunes suck him down a golf hole. Honestly, the film's first half is quite a bit of that. A plot that goes, and then this happened, and then that happens. You can tell by watching this film that the filmmakers weren't really too interested in the setup for this film. There are a lot of things about this plot that don't make sense, and there are some plot and character inconsistencies. Like, apparently every time a Looney Tunes cartoon plays on TV, it is being recreated by the Looney Tunes characters live, for some reason. At this point, wouldn't it just be a recording or something? That's honestly just confusing. And apparently, them disappearing from all their cartoons goes unnoticed, somehow. I guess because they were too focused on all the crap going on with the NBA. Also, the fact that Bill Murray and Larry Bird don't seem to bat an eye that Michael Jordan was sucked down a golf hole. And confusingly blame his disappearance on Stan's camera.
What kind of camera is that?
Would you not point that at me, please, and close the lens cap?
Doing that just to...
What? Or how about Bugs Bunny and Elmer Fudd's introduction, which blatantly contradicts every other hint in this film that the Looney Tunes characters are simply actors playing a part. With that said, there are some rather clever moments, though. Like Michael Jordan's huge climactic arm stretching scene was very smartly set up with Stan's balloon joke.
How'd you do that?
Aw, anybody could do that, Doc. Even you. Watch this.
No sweat. This is Looney Tune Land.
I also quite liked the placebo plot element in which Bugs and Mike trick the other characters into thinking that tap water is some kind of miracle drink. It does an excellent job of showcasing Bugs' ingenuity and his ability to use his wits in the heat of the moment. Also, making Marvin the Martian the referee was a stroke of genius. Anything great? Not really, but it does show some thought and effort did go into this. And to the film's credit, the section of the film that everyone watching this film came to see is done rather well. The basketball game offers exactly what was promised, the Looney Tunes being the Looney Tunes in a basketball game with Michael Jordan against aliens. I mean, if you go in wanting to watch a film based on that setup alone, well, the film absolutely delivers on that front. It's fun, it's energetic, and it's creative. While the animation direction and slapstick doesn't quite reach the levels of classic Looney Tunes a la Chuck Jones for instance, there is a genuine high energy feel to it, and they at the very least understand the importance of timing and how the anticipation of pain can be just as funny as the pain itself. My main issue is that sometimes the animation is perhaps a bit too rubbery for my taste, but overall it does get pretty close to feeling like you're watching a feature-length Looney Tunes cartoon. And yes, the mixing of traditional animation and live action is great and well handled here. Nothing really more to say. So let's talk about the gags. Now, unfortunately, as I already mentioned in my Weekend at Bernie's review, humor is extremely subjective, so it's incredibly difficult to ascertain whether or not someone is going to find a comedy funny. I mean, if you find something funny, you find something funny. There's no convincing you otherwise. And if you don't find something funny, you don't find something funny. There's no convincing you otherwise. Plus, for those that haven't seen the film, it can be a problem to talk about your favorite jokes because then you're just ruining them for those that haven't seen the film. But still, there are a couple of things that I can point out. For starters, I did laugh at quite a bit of the gags. As I said, for the most part, the gags maintain the spirit of the Looney Tunes. Imperfectly to be sure, but they're still in there. But I also think that the film should be commended for trying to tell a bunch of different jokes. For instance, the jokes about the 5 basketball players trying to figure out what's going on with them, kids aren't really going to understand them, and they feel very different compared to the rest of the film's more physical and slapstick-based humor. There's also a lot of meta humor that pokes fun at the fact that it's a giant ad, or that there are plot developments that make no sense.
Come on, Michael, it's game time. Get your Hanes on, lace up your Nikes, grab your Wheaties and your Gatorade, and we'll pick up a Big Mac on the way to the ballpark.
There are even some gags that are just so bizarre and out of left field that I honestly can't tell if they're brilliant or bad, like this scene. You know, I could talk about the fact that this is making a reference to a film, an R-rated film, mind you, a very, very R-rated film that no young child that this film was targeted to should be exposed to. A film that at the time this film was released was only 2 years old, and it's only by sheer luck that it's managed to withstand the test of time. But 2 things. 1, dated references to contemporary pop culture is very much in line with the original Looney Tunes.
Open up that door! You notice I didn't say Richard?
And 2, this actually opens up some interesting questions about this film's universe. I mean, in this universe, it's clearly established that the Looney Tunes characters can and do interact with the real world. So I guess that means in their off time, the Looney Tunes do watch the latest and most recent films. I'm just really curious as to how this system works. Are the films delivered to them and then screened at their cinema? Do they just magically appear out of nowhere? Do the Looney Tunes periodically sneak up into the human world and either interact with the media or simply sneak films back to show the others? In fact, forget Pulp Fiction. Every single Looney Tunes character seems to know who Michael Jordan is the second he shows up in Looney Tunes land. Do they receive television transmissions down there, like sporting events? If so, how? For that matter, why do the Looney Tunes not reveal themselves as being real to humans? Is there ever a reason given? I mean, Bugs Bunny tells Michael Jordan's kids not to tell anyone about the fact that he's going to help them win a basketball game. And sure, nobody would believe them, but only because the Looney Tunes chose to stay in hiding. Does this exist in some kind of Who Framed Roger Rabbit universe where the cartoon character Prejudice got so vitriolic that all the cartoon characters essentially went underground, literally, in order to escape the bigotry of the Hugh? Suddenly that tangent got very dark very quickly, and now I feel sad. Is there any evidence in the film to support this theory?
Do you know that your friends are cartoon characters?
Yeah, so?
No, doesn't bother you, it doesn't bother me.
Okay, stop. Let's just move on. Anyway, where was I? Oh yeah, the gags. What I was getting at was that because they tell so many different kinds of jokes, one of the problems with it is that it can create the feeling that the filmmakers are essentially throwing everything at the wall and seeing what sticks. And yes, not every gag works. And some really don't work.
Hey, little pig. Boo.
I wet myself.
But I will say, any film that manages to make a fart joke funny deserves at least some praise.
Oh, my.
That legit made me laugh. Also, say what you will about R. Kelly, and trust me, there's a lot you can say about him. But I Believe I Can Fly is a genuinely fantastic song. It's considered iconic for a very good reason. And yes, for those who don't know, this song was written specifically for this movie. Space Jam is a very unique specimen. From its inception to its execution, it can honestly be said that there is no other film quite like this. For all of its faults, this is a film that's definitely stuck with me. I could practically recite the entire second half of the movie from memory, even after not having seen it for probably a good 10 years or so. Now granted, that might be because I grew up with it and have a deep nostalgic connection to it, but there were other films and TV shows that I grew up with that didn't stick with me quite like this one did. So what gives? Why this one? Even after having spent the time analyzing this film and rewatching it again for the first time in years, I still can't give a definitive answer. Is this film flawed? Oh, without a doubt. But do I love it? Yeah. Yes, I do. I would gladly watch this again. Is it a guilty pleasure? Honestly, I think the film is too good to be considered a guilty pleasure, but it's in the same ballpark. There are some genuine problems with this film. I'm not going to say that there aren't. But it's also one of those cases where the film is actually kind of interesting in the ways in which it doesn't work, which winds up creating a film that's actually kind of both fascinating and endearingly charming in ways I don't think the filmmakers were intending. This is one of those films that has a lot of elements that blatantly conflicts with each other, which means the end result feels like it shouldn't work. But surprisingly, for a lot of people, myself included, it does. It's almost indescribable in that regard. I mean, if you try to describe this film to anyone who hasn't seen it, it sounds like something that's completely pandering and stupid. It stars Michael Jordan, playing himself, and he meets up with the Looney Tunes, and they battle aliens in a basketball game. and these aliens stole the talent of 5 other NBA players. Even so, I think some people were a bit too quick to dismiss this film. There are instances of clever writing, there are some good jokes, the animation's great, and the film is creative. But even then, I get where the complaints about this film come from. There are some plot and character inconsistencies. It never truly escapes the feeling that this is just one big product, and it's not completely bereft of annoyance. Honestly, I can say that it's actually impossible to predict whether or not you'll like this film until you actually sit down and watch it, which I guess you could argue is quite an accomplishment. So yeah, I am recommending the film, albeit with the caveat that I can't guarantee you'll like it. But still, I think even people who watch this film and don't like it can at least find a couple of things about it that they like. I mean, with so many things in this film, all the different kinds of jokes and different plots and subplots, I think it's safe to say there's at least something in here that'll intrigue you. At the very least, for better or worse, it's difficult to argue that the film is boring. It's a film that mostly stays true to the Looney Tunes spirit, and the places where it doesn't, in my opinion, aren't drastic enough to warrant ire. And if nothing else, this film acted as an excellent springboard for kids to be introduced to these timeless characters. This is actually how I was introduced. And sure, this film is far from perfect, but it was partially because of this film that I grew up to love these characters and their classic counterparts. So even if you absolutely detest this film, I just hope that you at the very least can appreciate the fact that this film wound up creating a lot of Looney Tunes fans, myself included, and honestly, I'd say that's a pretty good thing indeed. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed the video, please consider giving it a like and sharing it. If you have any films you'd like to see me tackle in the future, feel free to leave it in the comment section below. I'd be more than happy to hear your suggestions. Links to all my social media are in the description below. Have a good day, and I'll see you next time.